I always enjoy the changes of the seasons, and it looks like we're going to have a beautiful year this year for that. Today is the feast of St. Luke the Evangelist. His feast day is always on the 18th of October, and when it falls on a Sunday, then that becomes the theme that has precedence for that Sunday. Today is also the 20th Sunday of the Trinity season, but the feast of St. Luke the Evangelist has precedence even over that. It is a fixed holy day. Now, Luke was born in Syria, modern Syria. He was born probably in the city of Antioch, and it was undoubtedly in that city where he was introduced to the story of Christ and of the Christian church. Antioch replaced Jerusalem as the principal city of the Christian faith after the fall of Jerusalem in the year 70 A.D. Now, before the fall of Jerusalem in 70 A.D., as we heard from the reading in the book of Acts today, Paul went on a rampage, and he imprisoned many of the Christians in that city. And then he set out on the road to Damascus, and we all know that story. But that occurred before the fall of the city of Jerusalem in 70 A.D., when the 10th Legion of the Roman army moved into the city and dismantled the entire city stone by stone, especially beginning at the temple, the great temple of Herod the Great. It was only after St. Peter left Antioch and went to Rome that the center of the church's life became Rome. Prior to that, the center of the church moved from Jerusalem, Antioch, and then to Rome. And it was undoubtedly in the city of Antioch that Luke, who was a Greek by birth, but also a physician by training, heard the gospel and responded to the gospel and became a follower of Christ, and one who stayed with St. Paul, as we will hear in a few minutes, right to the very end of his life. So the progression of the church went from Jerusalem to Antioch in Syria, and then to the city of Rome as the center of the church's life. Now, Luke, as I've already indicated, was a non-Jew. Unlike most of the first century Christians, most of the very first century Christians came out of Judaism and went directly into the church, and this created all kinds of consternation and problems within the church, because there were those who insisted that all the Christians all the Gentiles who were coming into the church had to first become Jewish proselytes before they could become Christians. Luke, as the writer of his gospel and also the writer of the book of the Acts of the Apostles, was fascinated by Jesus' attitude toward non-Jews or Gentiles. Luke reminds us, and only he reminds us, that Jesus told his disciples, people will come from east and west and from north and south and sit at the table in the kingdom of God. Like many of Jesus' sayings, this saying has both a proximate and an ultimate meaning. The proximate meaning is this: the Lord's own table at which we gather each week should never be divided racially, it should never be divided ethnically, it should never be divided geographically, but it should be open to all who discern the body and the blood of Christ under the form of the bread and the wine. It should be open to all. The ultimate meaning of what St. Luke has just said is that the Lord's Supper in heaven will surprise all of us at its inclusivity. There will be people there that we simply cannot believe would ever make it to heaven, but they will be there. Now, it's Luke's gospel that includes such stories as Jesus prays for the faith of a Roman centurion, Jesus' care for the poor, and remarking that the poor are specially blessed, and Jesus' care for the black sheep in society. For example, the story of the prodigal son is found only in Luke's gospel. Luke seems to have a special attraction for the place and the role of women in the church. Luke points out, not the other Gospels, but Luke points out that Jesus paid special attention to women throughout his life and his ministry. In a world which held women in such low esteem that many Jewish men rose every day and thanked God that they were neither a dog nor a woman, Jesus raised and enhanced women. And we see this especially in his veneration of his own mother Mary. Many of the stories in Luke's gospel that are unique to that gospel must have come from the lips of Mary herself. So we know that Luke must have spent a great amount of time at Mary's side learning some of the more unique stories about the life of her son, Jesus. We know from St. Paul that Luke was a physician. We know from both his gospel and the Acts of the Apostles that he was both a good and thorough historian of both the life of Christ and the history of the Christian church from Jerusalem to Rome that we find recorded in the Acts of the Apostles. So we know that he was a doctor. We know that he was a historian. He was an eyewitness to many of the events that he describes in the city of Acts. Later church tradition tells us that Luke was also an artist. And Luke is reputed to have painted the first icon of the Virgin Mary. We have replicas of that icon until today, and those replicas capture her youth, her beauty, and her faith. So, it's only right that St. Luke should be the patron for artists, for doctors, and for surgeons. When all others had been removed from St. Paul's company as he faced his death in Rome, Paul wrote to St. Timothy these rather poignant words: "Only Luke is with me." Only Luke is with me. He was Paul's devoted companion, he was Paul's devoted friend, and he was Paul's devoted physician to the end of his life. We also learn from church tradition that Luke lived into his 80s, and he died somewhere in Greece, and given that his color for today is a red color, we have to assume that he was martyred at his death. So what should we today learn from this beloved saint? We should learn to pay special attention to all of those who are marginalized in society. We should welcome them into our fellowship and embrace them into our church. Second, we should learn to use all of our talents to the glory of God. Luke wrote well. He painted well. He served all the sick and the needy to the glory of God. And above all, Luke exemplifies the true essence